Welcome back, fellow brothers and sisters of the Creed, and get ready to hate me because today I've taken up a task that's gonna make me a lot of enemies. And to be perfectly honest, I'm kind of in a baffled state myself because the Assassin's Creed series, despite all its flaws, the shortcomings, and the seemingly weird route it's taken, has always gotten one thing perfectly: the historical setting in which the game takes place. Almost every single entry looks good enough to give you an authentic feel of what times used to be like back in the day, like way back. We witnessed the world all the way from 400 BC Greece, 1800s London. So we get a glimpse of how people's life and the society has changed in 2.4 millennium. And with each game's historical setting having a massive fan base of its own, I realized going into this video that I won't be able to please everyone. Fact is, today morning I woke up, looked at my dumb face and decided I'll do something really stupid and get people against me. So as you saw in the thumbnail, here in this video today, I rank all the historical settings in the Assassin's Creed series. Before we start the list, let me tell you based on what parameters I'll be ranking these games: accuracy of the map, the precision of the historical events, and the utilization of the setting in the plot. These three aspects in my opinion are really what make historical settings come to life. So now that we know, let's freaking go. Number 12, Assassin's Creed Rogue. As big of a fan as I am of Rogue, the one thing that was particularly unimpressive about this one off-the-beat Assassin's Creed game was its historical setting. Nothing is really of note. It just feels like an inferior and ignored little brother of Black Flag in many ways. There are no noteworthy locations, no significant historical events that occurred other than the earthquake in Port-au-Prince, Haiti, which for those of you who don't know actually took place. And then there's Nova Scotia, which is just a lot of water and forgettable islands. And Rogue didn't even give out a solid feeling of roaming around in 1700s New York in any way, and the setting was the weakest for sure. Next, number 11, Assassin's Creed 1. This isn't me knocking the legendary game off, but man, the setting was really dull. And I understand this was the debut of Assassin's Creed, and after the first game, the franchise really picked up and perfected most of the aspects in subsequent releases. But there is just nothing remarkable about the setting of Israel and Syria in 1100s. And it's not a fault on the creators' part. I'm pretty sure they did everything they could. But to be honest, there wasn't much they could do. Plus, I'll never be able to even like the weird sepia filter that I don't know who put over the entire game. It just made the whole thing feel damp and dull on top of its already unremarkable setting. But the reason it beats Rogue is the architecture of the cities is slightly better and a tad bit more accurate, but it's still only second from the last. Next up on 10, we see Valhalla. This game got most things right. The gameplay was great, the world bigger than ever, the visuals were stunning, the music was pretty good too. But there was one big issue: all the aforementioned aspects were not tied together with a solid Assassin's Creed story, because it's mostly about Odin and his family's squabble, which is kinda connected to the Assassin's Creed lore, I agree, but since it was mostly about gods, like literally gods, the setting was mostly ignored and out of the picture. The late 800 AD could have been a perfect setting for a Viking to rise and become an assassin, perhaps the deadliest one the world has ever seen. But no, they had to needlessly interject mythology, and why wouldn't they? Especially after the roaring success that Odyssey was. And the setting, despite having great potential, was terribly underutilized and overlooked. What a shame. Next up on number 9, we see Assassin's Creed Brotherhood. Despite the game being an almost perfect one of the aspects that didn't really impress that much was the historical setting. Story, music, and gameplay really took precedence over 1400s Rome, even though strictly from a visual perspective, the game was in fact stunning. And there are also so many noteworthy monuments like Castel San Angelo, St. Peter's Basilica, and the oh so beautiful Colosseum. There was nothing that tied the ongoing struggle between the assassins and the Templars with the happenings of Rome back in the day. And the setting ended up being just a backdrop and afterthought to all that Brotherhood had to offer. And it doesn't really bother me, to be honest, because I feel the game was all that I wanted it to be. But on this list, the game will only be able to crack the 10th spot. Next, number 8, Assassin's Creed Revelations. I realized that Revelations suffered the same problems as Brotherhood did, in the sense of it being unable to fully utilize the setting that the game takes place in. Constantinople was ground zero for a shift in the balance of power in 1500s. And the story does make use of the Ottoman versus Byzantine situation to a certain degree, which is exactly what put it ahead of Brotherhood, by the way. It's not even close to being what it could have been if the antagonist was actually antagonizing, and if there wasn't a more important main plot going on, which in my opinion really overshadowed the ongoing events of the era and the region. See, I understand this was Ezio's final chapter, and the developers were trying their best to tie all loose ends, and despite their best efforts, Altair and Ezio's story would always have taken center stage. But it still is a fact: the beautiful setting of 1500s Istanbul was never fully realized. Next, number 7, Assassin's Creed Syndicate. I feel Syndicate will always land in the middle of most of my lists, because if you think about it, it's not the greatest Assassin's Creed game by any stretch of the imagination. It's most certainly not the worst. It's just bloody good entertainment. The Victorian era London we see in Syndicate is a shining example of that. On the surface level, the setting is a solid one. It absolutely will convince you that you are experiencing an authentic simulation of 1800s England. The beautiful streets, the horse carriages, which I love by the way, the back alleys, the dimly lit street lanterns, industrial chimneys that touch the sky, and of course the perpetually busy Thames. So the visual aspect is on point. The problem is, the story didn't utilize that setting to its fullest. It's once again all about the assassins versus the Templars, and even though the side missions show how the Friars liberate London, it just sums it all up to the age-old rivalry. But I won't complain much, because as I said, the entertainment value was 100%, and that matters more than many people like to admit, myself included. Next, number 6, Assassin's Creed Unity. Once again, the conversation brings us to the most polarizing game in Assassin's Creed, and if I only took the utilization of said era and the setting into account, the game would be drastically low on the list. But then comes in the visual part, which in my estimation is beyond perfect. The revolution they've tried to show us could not have been put better on the screen. Unity is probably the most crowded Assassin's Creed game in the entire franchise, and it should be, because if there's an actual rebellion or uprising, there will be crowds, angry, densely packed mobs, and that's exactly what we got. Unfortunately, the main story had nothing to do with the French Revolution. I mean, if Unity took place a century before or after, it still wouldn't make that much of a difference to the story now, would it? And despite that, the game powers over much of its competition because of the visual accuracy of the time period, which might just be the best. Next up on the 5th spot, we see Odyssey. Another game with the same story as Unity, but in Odyssey, it's on an even grander scale, and the story has implemented some real historical events that occurred and intertwined it with the plot rather well. The Peloponnesian War, historical characters that play supporting roles like Aristophanes and Euripides, and the most eye-catching event, the Olympia. Hot damn! And then there's the best part, the visual aspect. Despite being a rough reiteration of what might have been, I cannot deny that it convinced me that this is exactly how it was. Endless monuments of old Greek gods, the oh so beautiful temples, the insanely realistic view, and the society which was colorful and just felt right. Odyssey is an achievement in the gaming industry, and despite the game not being liked by Assassin's Creed fans for its disconnect with the franchise, the game undeniably showed us ancient Greece in the most aesthetic way possible. Next on the 4th spot, we see Assassin's Creed Black Flag, one of the most complete gaming experiences I've ever had the honor of being a part of. What can I say, no matter what list I make, Black Flag somehow ends up in the upper parts of the list, and rightfully so, because it's a game that has won the hearts of millions. And despite it being more than 8 years since it released, it still manages to stun the players. And now let's talk about that, which puts it on number 4 in the list. The game shows us firsthand what it meant to be a pirate in the 1700s, and not only did it show the parts where they load people and kill them, it also showed us the struggle these pirates go through, the moral dilemma, the clash with governments, their own personal demons, and the horrible fates most of these free living men met. It's encapsulated the golden age of piracy perfectly. Then exactly why is it 4th and not 1st, you might ask? That's because despite the setting being undeniably brilliant, Assassin's side of the story almost ran parallelly instead of being entwined with the pirate side. And since the list has some heavy hitters, Black Flag will have to settle for the 4th spot. And now we get to the top 3, the cream of the crop, best of the best. And not shockingly, Origins is on number 3. Bayek's journey is one that could just be the best assassin origin story there ever was. And the setting is used to near perfection by the developers. Believe me, capturing and simulating Ptolemaic Egypt, the culture, the society, the people, the whole 9 yards, to an almost flawless level, somewhat of an impossible task, because it's an era that we don't know that much about. And despite the fact that it existed almost 2 millennia ago, the creators have done the impossible and done it in an unbelievable fashion. And also the setting is a major part of Bayek's road to his destiny. We get to see many top players of the era like Cleopatra, Julius Caesar, and King Ptolemy, and they all play an important role in the plot. I love stories like this where the assassins not only fought for what's right, but shaped an entire century the way they wanted. And on the 2nd spot, we see Assassin's Creed 2. What a game, what an experience. A time when all was right with the world. You know, Assassin's Creed 2 really brings back nostalgia on a different level. It gives me memories of a time and age when I didn't even exist. Because the Renaissance Italy in Assassin's Creed Creed 2 is something words cannot explain. Although I will try, it's something that have to be experienced to be believed. And the story is not just knit like a grandma's sweater with the era, it is the story of that era. Real historical characters, the protagonist being a part of all the major events, big players engaging in political games to shift the balance of power to their side, an unbelievably accurate visual representation of the time, the mystique, and the feeling of being in control of history itself. Man, this makes me want to go back and play the game again. And now for number 1, Assassin's Creed 3. Move over Unity because here comes the actual most underrated game of the franchise, Assassin's Creed 3. I really don't know how this game is so misunderstood by so many, because some aspects of the game are just breathtakingly brilliant. You know, Assassin's Creed 3's story is not like any other because the game has the perfect balance between the Assassins versus Templars and the American Revolution, like perfect. And we see Connor Kenway fight a war on multiple fronts. His enemies are countless, all with agendas that seem noble at times, all fighting for what they believe in, all of them part of a war that shaped future itself and formed the most powerful nation in the world, the United States of America. In every step of the way, we see how a war destroys as many lives as it saves, and we see this Native American assassin fighting to save the patriots, the assassins, the people from his village, sometimes a few Templars, and himself. In my humble opinion, the one game utilized the given setting to its fullest and actually showed the protagonist doing stuff that made a huge difference. You know, think about it. Connor was a part of such notable events like the Boston Tea Party, Paul Revere's Midnight Ride, the Battle of Bunker Hill. The list just goes on and on and on. And the plot also brings in such remarkable men like George Washington, Israel Putnam, Sam Adams, the aforementioned Paul Revere, and many, many more. Assassin's Creed 3 wasn't just a game for me. It was like being a part of the American Revolution and making a difference. And it's all thanks to the setting being perfectly utilized by the game. And that, in my honest opinion, is the true essence of Assassin's Creed. Stories of men from the past shaping the future, the architects of the free world. With that, we reach the end of the video, guys. Tell me exactly what you thought of the video in the comment section down below. Also, don't forget to tell me which is your favorite setting in the Assassin's Creed series. And if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like. It really helps tremendously. And it's free, so support a brother from the Creed. Also, if you enjoyed the content, please consider subscribing to the channel. There is so much Assassin's Creed content on its way, you will not believe it. So that's it for today, guys. Stay safe, stay strong, and stay tuned. It's your boy VZX signing out.